Ohjay had always been a man of deep faith. Growing up in the bustling city of Lagos, Nigeria, he was raised in a devout Christian family that instilled in him the values of love, kindness, and unwavering devotion to God. As a young boy, he was drawn to the church, where he spent countless hours attending services, participating in Sunday school, and eventually joining the church choir. His voice was a gift from God, resonant and soulful, and it wasn't long before he became the choir master of his local church. Ohjay was more than just a choir master, he was a pillar of the church community. His dedication to God was evident in everything he did. He led the choir with passion, ensuring that every hymn and gospel song was sung with reverence and joy. He organized church events, coordinated rehearsals, and even took it upon himself to mentor the younger members of the congregation. His life revolved around the church, and he wouldn't have had it any other way. Prophet Daniel, the spiritual leader of the church, had noticed Ohjay's devotion and commitment. Prophet Daniel was a man of wisdom and spiritual insight, respected by all in the community. He had a close-knit circle of followers, but Ohjay's dedication had impressed him deeply. Seeing the young man's potential and desire to serve God, Prophet Daniel invited Ohjay to live with him and his wife. The prophet believed that by living under his roof, Ohjay could grow even closer to God and receive spiritual guidance that would help him fulfill his divine calling. Ohjay was honored by the invitation. Living with Prophet Daniel would allow him to immerse himself fully in his spiritual journey, and he eagerly accepted. The prophet's home became a sanctuary for Ohjay, a place where he could pray, meditate, and seek counsel. Prophet Daniel and his wife treated Ohjay like a son, and in return, Ohjay devoted himself even more to his duties at the church. One Saturday evening, after a particularly moving choir rehearsal, Ohjay and Ada, the assistant choir coordinator, decided to visit Prophet Daniel at his home. The next day was Sunday, the most important day of the week for the church, and they wanted to finalize the details of the service. Ada was a young woman with a heart full of faith and a voice that could move mountains. She and Ohjay had been working together for years, and their collaboration in the choir had brought them closer. They shared a mutual respect for each other's talents and a deep commitment to their faith. At Prophet Daniel's house, the three of them sat around a wooden table in the prophet's study, discussing the plans for the service. The room was filled with the scent of burning incense, a symbol of the prayers that constantly ascended to heaven from that holy place. The walls were adorned with religious artifacts, and a large Bible lay open on the table, its pages worn from years of use. Ohjay, Prophet Daniel said, his voice deep and commanding, tomorrow's service must be one that touches every heart. We must remind the congregation of the power of God's love and the importance of living a life of righteousness. Yes, Prophet, Ohjay replied, his eyes shining with determination. The choir will sing with all their hearts, and I will lead them in worship as we've never done before. Ada nodded in agreement. The message must be strong. We need to reach out to those who are lost and remind them of God's grace. They spent hours discussing the songs, the sermon, and the flow of the service. Time seemed to stand still as they planned, their shared passion for the church and its mission driving them forward. It wasn't until they heard the clock strike 9:30 p.m. that they realized how late it had become. Ada, it's late, Prophet Daniel said with concern. You should be heading home. Ohjay, please see her off and make sure she gets home safely. The streets can be dangerous at this hour. Ohjay agreed, knowing that as a man, it was his duty to protect Ada. The two bid farewell to Prophet Daniel and his wife, thanking them for their hospitality. As they stepped out into the cool night air, the city seemed quieter than usual, with only the distant hum of traffic and the occasional bark of a stray dog breaking the silence. As they walked, Ohjay and Ada continued to discuss the service, their voices low and thoughtful. The streets were dimly lit by the occasional street lamp, casting long shadows that danced with their movements. The night was peaceful, but there was an undercurrent of unease that Ohjay couldn't quite shake. They had been walking for about 10 minutes when Ohjay suddenly felt a sharp, urgent need to use the toilet. It was a feeling he had been ignoring during the meeting, but now it was impossible to ignore. He stopped in his tracks, his face contorted with discomfort. "Ada," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, I need to use the toilet." Ada looked at him with concern. "Ohjay, are you okay? Can you hold it until we get to my house?" Ohjay shook his head. "No, I can't. I'm sorry, but I really need to go now." He scanned the area, looking for a place where he could relieve himself. The streets were empty, and most of the shops were closed. In the distance, he spotted an uncompleted building, its concrete walls rising ominously against the night sky. It was the only place he could go. "I'll have to go in there," Ohjay said, pointing to the building. "I'll be quick. You should go on ahead, and I'll catch up with you." Ada hesitated, unsure of whether to leave him alone. But she knew Ohjay was a responsible man, and she trusted him. "Okay," she said reluctantly. "But be careful. That building doesn't look safe." Ohjay nodded and bid Ada farewell before rushing toward the building. As he approached, the shadows seemed to deepen, and the air grew colder. He entered the structure, his footsteps echoing off the unfinished walls. The building was dark and foreboding, with piles of construction materials strewn about haphazardly. It was a place that had been abandoned halfway through its construction, a shell of what it was meant to be. Ohjay found a secluded corner and quickly relieved himself, hoping to finish before anyone noticed him. But as he did, a group of men emerged from the darkness, their eyes filled with suspicion and anger. They had been watching the building, on high alert after a recent string of robberies in the area. When they saw Ohjay enter, they assumed the worst. "Thief! Thief!" one of the men shouted, his voice ringing out into the night. The others quickly joined in, and within moments, a crowd had gathered, their faces twisted with fury. They believed they had caught one of the robbers who had been terrorizing their community, and they were determined to make him pay. Ohjay was startled by the sudden appearance of the mob. He raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, trying to explain himself. "Please, I'm not a thief. I'm just a choir master from the church. I was only trying to use the toilet." But the men weren't listening. Blinded by rage and fear, they advanced on Ohjay, their hands clenched into fists. They grabbed him, throwing him to the ground, and began to beat him mercilessly. Ohjay tried to shield himself from the blows, but there were too many of them, and he was quickly overwhelmed. The mob was relentless. They kicked and punched Ohjay, accusing him of being one of the thieves who had been stealing building materials from the site. Ohjay's cries for help were drowned out by the shouts of the crowd, who were calling for his death. Some suggested they should burn him, while others argued that he should be taken to the police. The situation grew more chaotic by the minute, and Ohjay's strength began to fade. In his mind, Ohjay prayed for deliverance. He couldn't understand how things had gone so horribly wrong. All he had wanted was to serve God, to live a life of righteousness. And now, he was on the brink of death, accused of a crime he hadn't committed. Meanwhile, Ada had not gone far when she heard the commotion behind her. She stopped and listened, her heart pounding with fear. She recognized Ohjay's voice, weak and desperate, pleading for mercy. Without a second thought, she turned and ran back toward the uncompleted building. When she arrived, she was horrified by what she saw. Ohjay lay on the ground, battered and bleeding, surrounded by a mob of angry men. Ada's scream pierced the night air. "Stop! Stop! He's not a thief. He's Ohjay, the choir master. We were just at Prophet Daniel's house." The crowd paused, their anger momentarily replaced by confusion. Ada pushed her way through the mob, kneeling beside Ohjay and cradling his head in her hands. His face was swollen, and his eyes were filled with pain, but he was still conscious. "Please," Ada begged, tears streaming down her face. He's not a criminal. He's a good man, a man of God. We were just coming from Prophet Daniel's house. Ask him. He'll tell you the truth." Some of the men began to murmur among themselves, uncertainty creeping into their voices. They had known Ada for years, and they knew she was not one to lie. But others were still skeptical, their fear of the recent robberies making them hesitant to let Ohjay go. Ada knew she had to act quickly. She took out her phone and called Prophet Daniel, her fingers trembling as she dialed his number. The prophet answered on the second ring, his voice calm and reassuring. "Prophet Daniel, it's Ada," she said, her voice shaking. "Ohjay's in trouble. The community, they think he's a thief. They are beating him. Please, you have to come quickly." Prophet Daniel didn't hesitate. "Stay with him, Ada. I'm on my way." Within minutes, Prophet Daniel arrived at the scene, his presence commanding immediate respect. The crowd parted to let him through, their anger giving way to shame as they realized who he was. The prophet's eyes swept over the scene, taking in Ohjay's battered form and the guilt-ridden faces of the mob. "Stop this madness." Prophet Daniel's voice rang out with authority. "This man is not a thief. He is a man of God, a servant of the church. How dare you accuse him of such a crime without proof?" The mob fell silent, their anger dissipating under the weight of the prophet's words. Prophet Daniel knelt beside Ohjay, placing a hand on his forehead. "Ohjay, my son, I am here. You will be all right." Turning to the crowd, Prophet Daniel spoke again. "Do you not know that it is a sin to bear false witness against your brother? This man has done nothing wrong. He was only trying to relieve himself. You have all been led astray by fear and suspicion. You must repent and seek forgiveness for what you have done." The crowd murmured their apologies, their heads bowed in shame. Some of them began to disperse, unable to bear the guilt of their actions. Others stayed, offering to help carry Ohjay back to the prophet's home. Prophet Daniel accepted their help, and together they carefully lifted Ohjay, supporting him as they made their way back to the house. Ada walked beside them, holding Ohjay's hand, her heart heavy with sorrow but relieved that he was still alive. Back at Prophet Daniel's home, Ohjay was laid on a soft bed, and the prophet's wife quickly set about tending to his wounds. She applied herbal remedies and prayed over him, asking God to heal his body and restore his spirit. Ohjay winced in pain but remained silent, his mind replaying the terrifying events of the night. Prophet Daniel sat beside Ohjay, holding his hand and offering words of comfort. "Ohjay, you have been tested tonight, but you have passed the trial. Your faith has remained strong, and God has seen your suffering. You must not let this incident shake your belief in the goodness of people. Remember, even in the darkest times, God is with you." Ohjay nodded weakly, tears filling his eyes. I didn't think I would survive, Prophet. I thought I was going to die. But you did survive, Prophet Daniel said firmly. And now you must use this experience to grow stronger in your faith. Forgive those who wronged you, and let God's love fill your heart. You have a great purpose, Ohjay, and this trial was but a step on your journey. The next morning, despite his injuries, Ohjay insisted on attending the Sunday service. He knew that his presence would send a powerful message to the congregation, a testimony to God's protection and the strength of his faith. When he entered the church, the congregation gasped in shock at the sight of his bruised face. But Ohjay stood tall, his head held high, and took his place at the front of the church. Prophet Daniel addressed the congregation, recounting the events of the previous night and the dangers of jumping to conclusions. "This man," Prophet Daniel said, placing a hand on Ohjay's shoulder, "is a true servant of God. He was wrongfully accused and suffered greatly, but he has forgiven those who harmed him. Let his story be a lesson to us all. We must not let fear and suspicion cloud our judgment." We must trust in God and show compassion to our fellow man." The congregation listened intently, their hearts moved by the prophet's words. As Ohjay led the choir in song, his voice was filled with emotion, and the church was filled with the sound of praise. The events of the night before had not broken him, they had strengthened him, and his faith shone brighter than ever. In the weeks that followed, the community came together to make amends for what had happened to Ohjay. The men who had attacked him visited Prophet Daniel's house, asking for Ohjay's forgiveness. They brought gifts and offerings, hoping to atone for their sins. Ohjay, with a heart full of grace, forgave them all. He understood that they had acted out of fear, and he bore no ill will toward them. His forgiveness had a profound impact on the community, and many who had been distant from the church began attending services regularly, seeking to strengthen their own faith. Prophet Daniel used Ohjay's story as a teaching tool, reminding the congregation of the importance of justice, mercy, and understanding. He emphasized that no one should ever be judged without knowing the full truth, and that compassion should always guide their actions. Ohjay continued to serve the church with renewed vigor, his faith unshaken by the ordeal. He knew that his life had been spared for a reason, and he was determined to fulfill his purpose. His story spread throughout the city, inspiring others to live their lives with faith and integrity. As the months passed, the memory of that fateful night began to fade, but the lessons learned remained. The community became more vigilant, not out of fear, but out of love for one another. They watched over each other, ensuring that no one would ever suffer as Ohjay had. The church grew stronger, and the bonds between its members deepened, forged in the fire of trial and redemption. Ohjay's life returned to normal, but he was forever changed. He had faced death and emerged with a stronger faith, a clearer purpose, and a heart full of forgiveness. And though he never forgot the pain of that night, he knew that it had been a necessary part of his journey, a journey that would lead him closer to God and to the fulfillment of his divine calling. The trials of Ohjay had not broken him, they had made him stronger, and his story would be remembered for generations to come as a testament to the power of faith, forgiveness, and the enduring love of God.